Ola so sanje judo soje sona la janjo bado tane jaso daje chujenge be sona je dola be sanje do para sho sanje chuda soje sona janjo bado tane jaso je daje chujenge be sona dola be sanje do para sho sanje chuda soje janjo bado tane jaso je daje chujenge be sona Dola benje sanje robara sho dayanta angade gade para songade bode so dayanta angade gade para songade bode so dayanta angade gade para songade bode so 라서 심지어 탐제가도 도자라나 마치고 산제에 고마를 못해 진짜 도와자 디치도 몇 장주서 말랍잖아 취시도 나도 랑와来신고 신발을 퇴고 퇴지 쇼만을 와지고 안 가서 봐봐도 다 간자제 계속 좀 보시고라 그 존중을 되는 제시 집이 삼삼체
So we begin, of course, by setting our motivation to do whatever we possibly can to attain the peerless state of enlightenment in order to be best able to benefit sentient beings. And we know that to attain such a state, we must perfect all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To perfect those trainings, we need to have a very good understanding of what they are. And to gain this understanding, we must be able to rely on a non-mistaken text and presentation. And so it is with this in mind that we're here to listen to an explanation of some verses from the King of Mind Training texts, the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, as composed by the great master Shantideva.
Ola so toche ane tene da kanja je namju ne shi che chane te kasule da range tungin nankala ane ngo range tinje zaga lama yimbola namba tapjela tuje chimbo tumba shaje tuba che se tap ane shaje chani kasa yesa ne yenyam shaga tene tuze kawa luse namba kula chubu mu mege doje so a chepe ngo sumba kora yu samsa che
And that's, as usual, also, we set up our visualization in the space in front. In fact, our own root guru, in aspect here, the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, with one face and two hands, with the right arm in the earth touching mudra, the left hand holding an alms bowl filled with nectar in the meditative absorption mudra.
랑게 타고도 안에 다 랑라 체디 진치가 마진 파만에 제베는 비비저 조보 조몰라서 아니 밤에 심제 아니야 지금 알아서 지금 레고 온기 디 랑톤에 기고 디 랑게 디톤에 기고 매게 다 타메가 다 세베 아니 감속에 심제 다 마서 매바 유어 삼삼체
And that also that we visualize in the space all around us, beginning with those who we have a relationship with in this life, be our parents, our relatives, our friends, those we have a neutral connection with, or those due to karma that we have a dislike for, and that feeling is mutual, and all sentient beings in all the 6 realms of existence without exception.
아니 뒤가서 semje 대다 탄대자 리두스도 동안 나시바 간이발라 아니 나 지금 가서 남방 당가로서 내시잖아 남주에 되게 아니 라마도베 뭐 구송도베 연된된 다음에도 와 이제가 모두 그때 발라서 왔는데 되게 아니 걔네 되게 공부하셔 아니 라마도베 온 것이 네 아니 라네 세드 라마도베 온 것들아요 아니 지워 점바 두가 혼 이게 숨져 세다 안 두가 혼래 왜세 빠 매번 전에 신라전에 아니 25 온라데 제바 젠자 25대 라마도베 온 넘바 젠자 팀 원래 온 거 출라마 저도 미주가 웃던데 같이 왔다 된데 25 무엇을 주는 왔던데 주요 삼삼체
And that these sentient beings are all resident in the various 6 realms of cyclic existence and suffering, and the sufferings relative to where they are at. They are recognizing this particular situation with a human intelligence, and so are looking towards the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha with deep appreciation of the qualities of enlightenment and generating the pure faith, the manifest faith, and the faith of conviction. And that the figure of the Shakyamuni Buddha, of course, is marked by the 3 syllables Om at the crown, A at the throat, and Hung at the heart center. From that Hung at the heart, light rays emanate, going out into the pure realms and bringing back the wisdom beings and empowering deities from these natural abodes. The wisdom beings dissolve into the central figure, and the empowering deities confer the nectar of empowerment, some of which now overflows at the Buddha's crown, producing spontaneously the figure of Akshobhya. And again, we can remind ourselves that this is actually going on. This is really actually there in the space in front. And that the figure that we're visualizing in the space in front is not a stagnant representation, but it's a very fluid intersection of activity with emanations going out, ripening minds needing to be ripened, and ripening further those minds that are already partially ripened. In other words, doing the actions of benefiting sentient beings. And then as some are going out, some are also returning, having completed that benefit. So it's a very busy situation, and that all of it does not exist in the way it appears. Yes, so not like a solid, stagnant statue effect, but rather something very, very fluid and real.
어디를 공부해 어디를 아니 되네 저 돈베게 아니 가서데 다 지금 구송투게 연대 되게 컴퍼스 강요 구송투게 연대 되게 공부해 안다 아니 라지바 탐자 저 샤지바 탈래 겨 콜라 투제 지본 이름에 맞죠 봐 팬다마다 탐제가 되게 어디를 저 아니 돈베 연대 되게 되네 아니 당에다 봐 이제가 또 뭐도 대바 되게 막 동리리 파겠잖아 아니 심제대다 탐제가 대화 대외풍 Bidiba Dunga Chigda Chig Natiki, what the nigga Nazu Samlatana and Simjelami Ninja. And Teta Dunga Juda Java Chana Chimor, Java Juja, Java Shuja, Java Target, Teta Jumba Lama Turia, which in the Lapus, says what the Kubasha, Simjata, the what the Juda, there was Juna Chimor, Temba Juja, Temba Shuja, Temba Target, Teta General Lama Turia, with and Chingi Lapus, and the Simjatan Jetak, there were the Juda Majana Chiwara, Midoja, Deta Lama Tuba, but Chingi Lapto, Simjata, Niri Chadanda, then Niri Chadanda, Dena Chimora, Jawa Juja, Jawa Shot, Jawa Target, Deta General Lama Tuba, and the Chingi Lapto, so the Kumashe.
And that, you know, we looking at this process which is unfolding in front of us, you know, we really are filled with this deep appreciation of the qualities of a Buddha's body, speech, and mind, and skillful means, etc. And that generates again afresh that pure faith, that faith of conviction, and that manifest faith. And that likewise, when we look on think of the qualities of an enlightened being too, how the Buddha is free of all fear of suffering in regards to themselves, is skilled in means in removing the fear of suffering of others, who works for others with great compassion and without a second of bias, and also works to benefit others regardless of whether there's any benefit in return. And so these are the characteristics of an enlightened being. And again, that further enhances our faith. And we also look on the sentient beings all around us and see how much they are craving suffering and yet, craving happiness and yet are bereft of that happiness, how they want to completely avoid suffering, but they are inundated by incidents of constant suffering. And that this kind of brings forth a sense of compassion for us, of how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could be free of suffering and its causes. May it be the case. I will see to it that it is the case. Oh, Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so. And how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. May this be the case. I will see to it that it is. Oh, Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so. Oh, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had a happiness that knows no suffering and the excellent bliss of liberation. And may it be the case. I will see to it that it is the case. Oh, Guru Deity, please bless me to make it so. And how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could abide in equanimity, free of attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. May this be the case. I will see to it. Oh, Guru Deity, please bless me to make this so.
What in the so out of Lama to be and Cosoda and Kuson to le, we say Pato Mebatron, we say Cabo, Pato Mebatron, around the Chibone, Mazutuma, Kebatuya, Temeshi, and Yamsa Lembala Paduce, debated with Nani, Tension subset. Until so the Niba Chavalatena, and we say several shook chance at Tune, round around how the market subject and Chibone, Madushon, and it's a message of Toba Kebaja, subject object, and Gula Tenso, or Gula de Pacha Kebaja Shasu, so what the commission.
And so as a result of this heartfelt supplication, the Buddha, from the body, speech, and mind, from the 3 syllables of the Buddha, the light rays emanate, and we are indulging in the ascending nectar light meditation with the white light predominant at the outset, thereby purifying all negativities and obscurations since beginning this time, and particularly those obscurations and obstacles preventing us from generating a clear realization of the 4 immeasurables. And likewise, following the white light, then the yellowing golden light is predominant, and despite bestowing on us the true potential to generate the full realization of the 4 immeasurables.
What the commercial, what that delay in by Insa, what that Simja Tamja, Dewa Tamja, the Batunga Tanja, the Java, that to be on Bugi, Gombaja Matana, Tameva in by Insa, what I can that's also jigging is the Jigato that Gemma was Simja Tamja, Simja Chigi, Dewa Tamja, Dunga Tamja, Java Jetu Mate. That the day in by Insa, that the Jetu and Nivasula Jotana, and Rangatuna said the Lama to be on whatever. Tell you when Anti combat Madron Tomando, and it you combat to what jigging, Sati combatana, Juba Ima, and Kechi de Dena, and a Duja come the Meba. Chita was the king of Yoba, and Duja to the Majua making you do, and we should use a Duja Pema by chatting you do, and a dear Comamaton Tama to watch a teacher, and a change of Shunki, and Geshe to be making something. What a Toba to be able to come, she was going to catch it, trusting one. What did I say?
And so this heartfelt wish, really, that we have, that all sentient beings should have happiness and its causes should be free of suffering and its causes, etc., is very strong in us, of course. But at the situation we find ourselves in, we can't even do this for one sentient being. It's clear. And so, but when we look to the state of enlightenment, the state of a Buddha, we realize that that is the state from which we can really work, come perfectly to benefit sentient beings. From that state, we have this understanding of the individual dispositions and personalities and so on, the various karmic implications, everything, and we can work directly and indirectly to benefit the sentient beings. So it's very clear that this is the state I have to attain. I have to attain enlightenment in order to properly benefit all sentient beings and to help them to gain this happiness and to remove this suffering. And so this is why now I am here to listen to some verses from the Bodhisattva's way of life.
Voilà. Da shiba kangla tosam chegube shitela ni chen. Ro to de la temba da tenju la temba wo sen. Temba wo chen, temba wo chen da. Temba wo chen. Temba wo chen. What the chen. Kada ka jaji da de chue kasa de tuba sange chomde de la tugu yoba isa. Ane tembe ngoje tembe namda chiju duje nyamne situ da tembe ge ane 지가서 데 네베 람데 아니 랑게 된도 니고 요바 인사 아니 지 템베 냠뇨 되는 송와티 두고 요바 인사 아니 도델라 때 맞아 다 도데데야 저 나라도 치중고 두자 고토마도 마부 용고 요래 아니 도델레 좀 되게 아니 두자 가서래다 간자 지 두자데 가서래 다지 가서데 리타이어 바지도 양 고장되는 예정이 예와체 마시나야 그래서 뭐여기 내주디 랑 마티바 정도도 뭐마도 정도도 야 대줄을 된 거야지 용거도 오다 대줄을 된 봐서 어디니자 도텔을 된 봐다 대줄을 대봐 니 용거도 와 당고 도텔을 된 봐들 자와려 배종에 남달에 라마데베 추달라 대다 산제 가제시 도텔라네 셰바자 도텔 남래 라바나 대외 도대 라바 자사 나게 닝보 도대네 토마니도 따와 자스.
So the next outline is a fourth, and it's the basis of whatever we need to learn and contemplate. And this has two subheadings: how we must rely on the sets of sutras, and how we must train by relying on the sets of, the commentaries on those sutras. And so this describes, first of all, the words of Shakyamuni Buddha, how the Buddha, through his own experience, gained conviction in the path and therefore expounded on that path. And those words of the Buddha are known as the sutras. And so the sets of sutras are the actual words of the Buddha. And then following that, then the disciples needing to practice what had been spoken in the sutras, in some cases unsure of what was definitive and what was interpretative in the meaning that the Buddha meant. And so from this arose the whole tradition of the commentaries on the sutras. And so here we have both this necessity of relying on the sutras themselves and relying on the commentaries to those sutras. Verses 103 and 104. I should practice entrusting myself to my spiritual master in the manner taught in the biography of Sri Sambhava. This and other advice spoken by the Buddha I can understand through reading the sutras. I should read the sutras because it is from them that the practices appear. To begin with, I should look at the Sutra of Akashagarbha.
Tembe chui kebar sumbatar and lapures what the lapures shen tenju dida sanje je katse laba shen taking it to the lanas taking it to the sheba jene sheba chalas to the namle laba jawa ta just a lapcha tembe shun kebar tumba now devena to the laba chacha. 도대체 다 지금 로고 캐와도요 주동 람베 기부 주동 셈게네 아니 로아 가서도 면셈게 되나 주셈게에서 기비 파바나게님비어서 도대 토마니도 따와 저스다 가자지 주셈란에 아니 저발라 그랬을라 고유메데 남게님보 도대대 아니 당분에 아니 하고 지고라 셔바 오자.
And so here it's describing the particular chapter from the Ganda Vyuha Sutra, in which we hear of the biography of Sri Sambhava, in which it shows the process by which one should properly rely on a spiritual teacher. And it's very extensively laid out there. And also from the commentaries on the Buddha's, the word, the skillful advice of the Buddha is interpreted through these commentaries, and especially the Mahayana sutras. They should be read and they should be understood. And it said that since what has been laid out is extensively laid out in the sutras, that we should concentrate on reading those sutras. In particular, it said that this particular sutra of Akashagarbha, leading into the entering into the Bodhisattva's way of life and the vows and so on, holding on to those vows is explained very extensively there. And so that should be first looked at.
Kanche tato cheba ne dele jache rabdenbe laba kunle tuba yang nyeba yang yang do ta yana reshin do debe dona kunle tuba taas papa lutu jezebe nibo bebe tawa chas.
And the second of these outlines then was relying on the commentaries to those sutras. Look at verses 105 and 106. So in addition, I should definitely read the compendium of all practices again and again, because what is to be constantly practiced is very well and extensively shown there. Also, I should sometimes look at the condensed compendium of all sutras, and I should make an effort to study the works by the same two titles composed by the exalted Nagarjuna.
Odele chen da kanje gangi che tado lapshin sa da kanje che rod janju semba joba tachimbe chido da tado laba chawe shide lapjing se jeba ne sa labdu de sa da shung labdu gu shung tila labkuras labdu dele jache rabdu dembe dele da kanje che kese joba na da kanje shibchi chawa dengu yobasa dembe laba kule tuba yang ngewa yang ne yang to tawa chawo yana reshin do tube sa lobe rani gi zebe dona kule tuba tawa chawo sa papa ludu gi zebe do kule tuba yang tuba ni nibo bebe tawa chawo sa.
And so here the advice is to really look into what is kind of like presented as that which should be constantly practiced and in the kind of collection of practices. And so it's kind of like it's kind of well laid out and very extensively laid out in that particular title known as the compendium of practices. And so there we should again and again read that and study that. And also then there's this text known as the Compendium of Sutras, which is actually a title as composed by the very author of this text, and that should be looked at as well. And it's also recommended that two titles of the same name, the Compendium of Practice and the Compendium of Sutras, as composed by the Arya Nagarjuna, we should really make every effort to look at those also. And also I was saying like it's Arya Shantideva who's also composed a text known as the Compendium of Practices, and so he's got a Compendium of Sutras and a Compendium of Practices as well. So it's yes, they're kind of short texts, not too much in them.
Oda diga kanja diga kasode oda mixu kani oda diga chene da kanja diga ceden ge shung de zu de chene da kanja de chene ani diga za diga donda de shimba chene ani shimba donde ani nyamsulang go resu yorwa shimba donde nyamsulang go res.
So what in brief what is being exhorted here is that we inform ourselves by reading the sutras and commentaries so that we have a good understanding of where happiness comes from, how to avoid suffering, and therefore we have the confidence to be able to practice accordingly.
Shen Jinzi Nemi Shimbe Chana, and Jinzi Koto Jene, and Chikasoda Takaji, Ran Jinzi, Kotuman, Samlotan, and Ran Jinzi Kanto to the God, and Kasoda Ran Jinzi, Shaman Tatapchia, and Ran Jinzi Shaman Tatapchia, and Shen Jinzi, and Kokuna. Ti yunde tene an kanto do ge ani shen chen compared to tane ani je ka so la ta ka che ra shin ji ga de ta chi ba tu tu ye ge ta ka sa te ka so la ta de la mik tu ba che ta ka je ge chi shu de ta ka che ra chen chen ong ge ani ra ya pong shen ya pong su go shen chen chen ong ge ani shen le di gi to ra le di gi to chi ge yo ba yin sa di gi ge ani ka so de sem ge ka so de这个早上的也不真的也把定出不去你也把定的你把一把一呢俺给这个做不老完了刚刚这个嘛了吧给这做完了老完了刚刚这的个这个啥个啥让生活生活就生的我那就生活生活生活我们生活就做这个有吧俺这个他妈没问的让这些都恐怕让这些讲那说说偏个有把说是哪话吃这个有吧生活了真的是的但现在这些讲那俺那个的俺中国那个的三十几돈다 문에도 대리면 도 돈다 문에도 현진제잖아 랑라 핑게도와 랑 제제잖아 랑라 누구도와 다디 돈다도 뭐좀 뭐마죠 몽배 옹게 뭐마죠 받잖아 아랑 제제잖아 소소 핑거 요바지 삼로다 현진제잖아 말에 용어라겠지 그래 삼사지 삼로 15들을 텐데 쉬어도 아니 돈다도 좀 마도 받잖아 아니 모두네 아니 동에 미디어신도 연구해지 용어 되겠도와 다 되게 돼 딩게다 생겨 조다한테 오 되게 원래도 현진질을 때는 연구도 랑진진게 돼 아니 제가 저 호텔 때나 소소 편바 조건 소리 도다데 편바 레모도 랑 네게 데 우마데 랑진진이 맞아 셈 딩는 워터네 tilling yeba ting suba ji jungwa yina ani gese ge joba la kang che ge marwa kasi gese ge joba se de nega da tado kang la pemba pashi ge ani kasa gyuchang gyugen yongsu soba chang de ge jre do an de sui ne jo ma ji wa yong marwa ta ka jang yeba ge ma ge ta ke ba sho marwa ani samlu go jodan de la de samlu jodan ge ne ji ge so so le di ge yong do samlu jodan ge de ji ge dong ge yong do yeba ting ne yeba ji 잡대 참아 여바지 근데 저번에 현진들을 잡대 참아도 란진들을 잡대 참아민도 잡대 참아 매바 이나 아니 데 딱한 저 비다 보지 매바 다 쳐버려 왔다
So really it boils down to the degree to which we are under the influence of self-cherishing or cherishing others, and that it really boils down to that much. Here we have to kind of see the faults of the former of self-cherishing, to see how embedded and insidious those faults are and have been. And have only been something which has been detrimental for ourselves and for others. And whereas the attitude cherishing others is one of inestimable qualities and benefit for others, and that is what we need to habituate towards. And so that here we have the kind of the equation is simple, that self-cherishing is something which is harmful for both myself and others. And cherishing others is something which is beneficial both for myself and others. And that the self-cherishing attitude is really destructive. It really destroys any hope of happiness for myself and others. And so we have to have, deep conviction in both the destructive element of self-cherishing and the beneficial element of cherishing others. And so in that way, we can then embrace the Bodhisattva practices. It's a very essential kind of a conviction to gain before any success in completing a Bodhisattva's life. And so this is what we have to understand, because we can obviously, when you're trying to live a life at such a high standard, you're going to encounter problems. And you know, you're going to have situations where you go, oh, if I enter into this kind of action, it might be something bad for me, or it'll be something, a loss for me. I'll lose out in some way. And one has to identify that as the talk of self-cherishing. This is the kind of like the self-cherishing getting in to your motivation, and that it is a destructive and insidious element, and one must recognize it there and then as that ultimate deceiver. That is kind of like pretending that something is a good choice, where in fact it's a negative choice, pretending that something is going to be to your loss, when in fact, if you can proceed with it and persist with it, it will be of benefit to you. And so again, that we have to understand that the mind which cherishes others is absolutely well founded. That every sentient being has a right to be happy. Every sentient being has a right to avoid suffering, and they have an equal right as I have to that as well. And that is very, very important. They do want happiness, of course. They do not want suffering. That is obvious, and we should do everything to fulfill both the absence of suffering for them and the bestowing of happiness. So the idea that self-cherishing can be of some kind of benefit is absolutely deceptive. And that from the Bodhisattva ideal, it's set on both the temporary and ultimate benefit to others. And so if there's anything that looks like, you know, contrary to that, then you're talking self-cherishing. So it's kind of like here, it's down to thinking, really. You know, it's through our thinking and that we can generate, like, we live a life of happiness. It's through our thinking that we can remain mired in suffering. And that it's only one of those that is validly backed by solid reasoning. And that is the mind of happiness, wanting to generate causes for happiness, wanting to live in happiness, wanting to produce happiness for others. That is based on valid reasoning, where the suffering side is not.
Of course,
that in acting our bodhisattva motivation, one has to have the combination of the mind of enlightenment together with wisdom. That's very important. It's when you're operating through the mind of enlightenment alone, it's very likely that mistakes will be made. But when we have that mind accompanied by wisdom, we have every chance of success. And of course, there's conventional and ultimate wisdom. And that as much as possible, we accompany our action with that combined mind of enlightenment with both conventional and ultimate wisdom to the best of our ability.
Tanda shiwala ki chunju sune ane tene liu ta tene cha consumption ta shiwala ta kaso de lu yu tol cha shiwala mashu barwa ta mashu chite ane ta shetan ni cha ne chenju la liu gui ta ni re chui ta ni re sene ta daga na la ma tumba ni chung de ane jele shiwala lo chong wala shu do situ lo chong wala 로종어 대 슈샤스도 아니 시와라 군들을 짜네 안다 리우 가서다 다가자데 쇼로가 동 요겐 지다 쇼로가 가다 간자 굽자 말베치 요겐 자데가 리우 구직이자 류주유근스다 셰주미셔와 니 용도도 어느 가지 거기나서 오다 셜로가 동자바들에 류주탕바유 뭐에 류집에 류주탕바유 어떤데 송야다 아니 다가네세 가서 간체 따도 제반에 텔레 자제랍던베 라바쿨레도 봐야 예와 야나 양도 다스 라바쿨레도 봐 예와 야나 양도 다 송샤 안데 라바쿨레도 가이나서 어떻게 벤지다게 이게 참을라 티잖아요 이게 코란 쇼사게 다다데 가서라다 안데 쇼사게 안데 싱가 바라 인터스 주샤유스 어떤데 롱데 유에는 용도도 와 그 송규들의 용도도 다게 배자라다 통마선데 와다데 제데 패제 남다나 인게 다 간자 와다데잖아 와다데잖아 용도다 와데 라바쿨레도바 예바 양의 양도 다스 와다 전주 dim마자 안 콩게티바 랍듀데 양의 양도 다스 라바쿨레도바데 양의 양도 다스 다디니 송도 제네 데네스 야나리션 도데 도나쿨레도바 파발루두게 제베 니보가 베베다 와다데 저 콩블루두게 제베 와도쿨레도바 야 다스 와다데 송데게 도네 제네 아니 저 계속 좀 타지마 씨바 치스게 제가 랭고도와 호텔
So then in that line where it points out that what is to be constantly practiced is very well and extensively shown there, meaning in the compendium of practices. And again, as identifying that as another composition of Shantidevas, because we know from the story of Shantideva's composing of the Bodhisattva's way of life that shortly afterwards he left the monastery, and then there was some confusion in the minds of those remaining as to how many chapters and so on there were of the text. Was there some missing, etc.? And they sent out a party to actually look for Shantideva and found him in South India, and asked him these questions, and he clarified that yes, there were 10 chapters in the Bodhisattva's way of life, and there's a brief commentary to be found in the rafters under the thatch in his hut in the monastery, where you would find this particular commentary, the compendium of practices, with quotes from all the different pandits and scholars backing up what was written in the Bodhisattva's way of life. And so he's saying that this also, since it is kind of very extensively shown there, that it should be read again and again and again. And then likewise pointing out the way in which these titles, as composed by Arya Nagarjuna, should also be looked at and studied closely.
Gane magaba deni se jeba chawa de jigden simne sunyechi lava tonne yangda je.
So the second main outline was the conclusion, and it's a conclusion of the this chapter. And so verse 107 states, I should do whatever is not forbidden in those works. And when I see a practice there, I should impeccably put it into action in order to guard the minds of worldly people.
Di chekugures nawa ania di genetic maris kapata ania dugi kebata tele mabu yude dige tanga nanga nesu dige shibache kasa kapata kasa kapata po da magaba dini esa chebar chedesa da 제발 자다 냠슬랑 와치 고르스 레버 차자서 안 고바 직된베 셈네 송신서 마데바 주 외치르서 뭐 송신 마데바 방베치 장세가 라바 통네 양다바 줘바 쳐서 와다 간제지 레다 간제지 리가셰다 간제지 지 셈마데바 주야다 아니 야 지금 생기 가서다 간제지 지 생기 가서다 녀모 겐제 줘야다 다든데 용해 되게 아니 가서다 마데바 줘야 되게 빠네 되게 송 아니 다가네 시 자주세베 랍자 되게 통네 양다바 아니 제고레스 다 냠슬랑도 바치고레스
So here it's pointing out that in all of the sutras and indeed the commentaries that whatever there is proscribed, that should be abandoned and eradicated from one's behavior. And then what is not proscribed, that we should try to take up and practice. This is partially in order to really protect the minds of worldly people, as it says there, those that have a lack of faith or who have abandoned their faith or who have a frequency of mental affliction arising in their minds. And so also for that purpose, and whatever we see in those texts, in the training of the Bodhisattva or the Bodhisattva mind, that we should impeccably or perfectly try and put that into practice.
writing ke shela manu ba che ke chishuru ma shela manu ba che to ta ani che kaso de shela manu ba che to ta ka de tembe kaso da ka cha che de neba ma yo che to suyin ba ina de neba ma yo che to ta de kaso de dige namye dige de shimba che ne ani ko sapsa che de ke che bo de dida shodo ani Geshe chobata megawar jotuyechi roda dige sungje to the jokoi sung yoro wotate.
So of course, when it refers to the minds of the worldly, that here, of course, we should not in any way insist that what we're practicing is right, and therefore they should take it on. But to make our approach so that there is no hope of any harm occurring in that interaction, in that exchange. And therefore we need to kind of really be careful to engage in every possible consideration prior to that interaction, so that it can turn out as well as possible. But from our own point of view, that we try to maintain that bodhicitta mind in all of our thinking and doing, and therefore to impeccably or perfectly put it into practice.
Ta niba tsikza mayin ba duen nyamso langwe be tsuje se chukdo wala ni chen ta laben ne ta da jemba da sheshin ju songko ba tang songko ba tang ngo ju de no xiang wo de ni chen.
The second main outline was to the conclusion, looking into how we perfectly practice not just paying lip service to the teachings, but actually putting the meaning into action. And this has two subheadings. The first is the necessity of guarding our mindfulness and alertness in order to be able to practice all the trainings perfectly. And the second of these outlines is the actual meaning of that.
Hotel Chanta Kanjache Hotel Chanta Laben Netada as a Tamu Nebe Laben Netada Shimbache, Shinani, and it Kasoda Takaja, Jamba the Shishing Sunkova, this Sungovani, and Zawaliasa, Luda Semje Negala Yanga Yanto Taja Lasa, Tenikwana Donani, Shishin Suni Dos.
And so that first one then of ensuring that all the trainings are guarded by our mindfulness and alertness. verse number 108, which says, the defining characteristics of guarding alertness in brief is only this: to examine again and again the condition of my body and mind.
and yana yando ta kaza de lewa meba chene yana yando ta kwa chawa ta kaza de dola chiguras sheba ngoto ba chiguras ta kwa chawa deni khona do de nani sheche suwe ota dines jeto ba ina ota shechen suwe nyamne jigu yor santa changwe asa cheni ino sa ta shechen nyamne ge nyamne ta kaza jo suwe ta kaza do da changde ko cheni de changde ko cheni do sheba wo cha.
And so here, this is describing really the defining characteristics of guarding our alertness, so that it does not degenerate. And here it's a question of really looking into the condition or the state of one's body, one's speech, and one's mind, one's thinking, so that we can check whether we are acting in accord with the trainings or in harmony with the trainings, or we are acting contrary to those trainings, that whether or not we are under the influence of mental affliction. And it's a case of, it's an aspect of wisdom that is checking into this again and again and again. And this is pointing this out. This is the essence of the defining characteristics of alertness.
다 다가는 저 류기 아니 가서 그 류기 그 자원고수 제배 걸어야 류로 돈아 숙체자 류기 돈에야 지가서데 지가 줘받은 미투버 용거리에 삼사 나게 제배 거도 나라 돈아 숙체스잖아야 나게 돈에 아니 지가서데 줘받은 미켜와다 아니 지가서 줘다 미투버 내가 되게 용거리에 삼사체 아니 이게 가서 오다 다 다디 개체슈들 와다 개체슈들 아니 되게 되는가 아니 간토도게 더 못쳐봐제 셔봐제 아니 되는 간토도 동세대 수고요 와다 와데네 다 간제 그 룡아 이송 근데 내가 유바이네 와다 디제베컬로 딜레견도 요거래 디제베컬 딜레견도 요거래 스페나 류컬 류견도 요거래 삼사제는 아니 지금 당분에 대체가 소야 나게 되고 오다 서서 맞잖아 나네 마고에 된다면 뭐지 세계에 삼사제는 지금 소래 당분에 그 대세 요바체자 다 이게 삼도단도 오다 다가는 신체는 되게 다 용거래 삼사제는 아니 거기 디 상황도 마다와 아니 그디 상황도 소와네 귤뭐 마고 와체는 못 줘봤지 어쩌고는 당분에 지금 상황도 마주 와시 우주 비다보도 연구 말을 봐 다그 숙충도 다는 거다 당분에 못 줘봤지 아니 되네 지금 가서 지금 심어있는 귤뭐 마고 왔잖아요 아니 뒤쪽 가서 주 가서데 막 가서 녀바들에 도투에 나게 녀바들에 도투에 이게 녀바들에 도투에 왔는데 이런 뭐 귤뭐 마고 그때 중앙에 귤뭐 마고 도투에 아니 되네 간사서는 아니 왔다 지금 차로 왔다 남자 된데 좀 고조 왔다 남자 도마도 왔잖아 가투에 되네다 거기 되네 리메스는 거기 저 가서데 지금 뇌제 마종고네 안에 뭐트도에 중국으로 왔다 용구로 왔다 되게 그가 당분에 제시에 손을 잡아나 아니 걸리 아니 고 가서대다 지금 가서대 샹다 랑게 가서다 어디 두투와 중국으로 와 어디 두투와 중국으로 왔지 안 타마 뭐럼 준제 잡네 왔다데 가서대 제시에 손도와 중어서 뭐럼 준제 잡네 왔다 제고 임발 왔는데
So, this really, it calls for a certain level of increased attention to actions of the body, physical actions, when, that is the predominant action that we're undertaking. And of course, when we're speaking, then his mind is brought to bear on the actual words that are coming out of our mouths, and to be more mindful of what we're saying and so on at that time. And then, of course, most importantly, to really guard the mind and what we are thinking, because this is what prompts both speech and body action. And so here we have to be able to spot, like a preemptive sighting of possible problematic thinking, problematic speaking, problematic action of the body, and to kind of use our mindfulness and alertness, the wisdom that's involved in checking our behavior a lot more in detailed way to make improvement. Now, of course, when you start this off, it's very difficult to maintain that level of attention even. But if we persist, there will be a gradual reduction in the unhealthy and unbeneficial actions of body, speech, and mind, and that the number of negative instances will reduce. And this will give us the incentive to continue on and reassert our efforts. It's very, very important. And that's the first part. The second part is to bring mindfulness and alertness to bear when the mental affliction arises in any of these actions, and to therefore be able to quickly put a stop to it, to really stop it in its tracks. And the whole process is really one of gradual. It's going to be a slow refinement of our actions of body, speech, and mind. And that there's no harm also in supplementing our efforts of mindfulness and alertness with aspirational prayers, seeking to assistance in doing the same. And so here it's a case of learning how to recognize the faults of our physical actions and to put a stop to them, of recognizing the faults of our speech, our verbal actions, and stopping and taking great care with what we say. And of course, starting with the mind, really looking after the thinking. What are the thoughts that we are entertaining, and to really start the process of refining our thinking, our speaking, and our physical actions. And that this is really what is being referred to in the kind of a reference to sutra and commentary, that all of this is really pointing to the process of restraint, that we have our habits very well laid down, but we're trying to restrain negative actions of body, speech, and mind, and to kind of really when they arise, to stop them at the very outset, and then Secondly, to prevent them from recurring. That is the kind of like the promise not to engage again. And so we're into the process here of the confession and purification of negative actions. So that should be brought to bear at this point as well. And then the second of these subheadings was the actual meaning. And this is verse 109. Therefore, I shall put this way of life into actual practice. For what can be achieved by merely talking about it? Will a sick man be benefited merely by reading the medical texts?
laba deda ani chebar chegos laba deda nyamsulang gos chebar chawa ingesa da nyamle mewa chene ani chege namran sa dewa de ta nge di changyi sen wa da sobe sa ne ani chigmang bo je da ba jang ge chig jom jebe go ba kariyo go ba chi chi tu de mitublas ro mitula pena meje laba sam je se na ge yoba ina na ga di na za na de ge neba di ani meje ge mengi kasa mengi menju chedan kande chegure se ge jeshe de laba sam ge ne neba de pengere peng marwas pemba mi jo shino sheba ucha.
And so here is really saying, that all the actions of our body, speech, and mind, the behaviors of body, speech, and mind, that we should really, as it pointed out here, look into them and engage in the refining practices. And it's kind of saying here, we know what to do, just do it. Don't just keep talking about it. You can talk about it, forever, but that it's not going to do you any good unless you actually integrate it into your life, into your very practice, and really start to refine all of these behaviors. It's the same as saying the example of the patient who is reading the medical texts and talking a lot about the medical texts, but there's no kind of medicine forthcoming, and say, will that person be benefited? Will they recover? The answer is no. What good is it just to read the text without actually taking the medicine?
that you can just do down the animal deshe kyong and did the too much of social machiva and you do to marwa. You do to marwa.
And so here is saying that yes, knowledge is important, but more important than knowledge is the putting of that knowledge into practice. This must be the case. This must be the case not only to be able to receive the benefit, but also to see the way it works, how it is a benefit through our own experience. That's most important. And it's kind of saying that's the kind of like what you take on as an inner being. The inner meaning is to kind of have this control of and restraint of the mind, and that one is in full control of all of our actions and behaviors. And so then and this is the final lines of that chapter. This is the name of this particular chapter is the chapter on guard, the fifth chapter of this text on guarding alertness, in the book, or the title known as the Bodhisattva's Way of Life.
That was that Panjaka Shishing Jarachen, any Kyan Chuta Mocho, any Motobachen, any Kyan the Machua, you ended to Jumege, and that Kopashako, the red one, that did what Shimasanga Pengumadua, Shiman Kotel Lalele came out with the Tenshik Masua, the Yonting Dua. And Jelaje Hako di Chiragdo, Tatarebo, the remote result, and Cochiragus was put Tambune, Coach the Capital Takati, Namne Chemato.
So this chapter really points out the differences between whether one is applying the principles of mindfulness and alertness or not applying them, and showing the consequences in either case. And it's really saying at the end here that it's not enough to know what the benefits of mindfulness and alertness are, but rather to put that into practice. And that is so important, and that it's no good in kind of constantly procrastinating. It'll reach a point where it will be too late for us, and then it'll be only regret for not having put that into practice, even though we knew what it means and so on.
What is it? That is Shabbat done live to what so well live to what that Takajas Marato getting was that didn't want the value the Jamader Teshajana, the Shashaka, the Sha, and the Betsanga Tango Chick the Star, Marbe.
So we will move on next week to an extremely important chapter for us all, as Genla points out, the chapter on patience, very essential. But we leave the text for today and do some practice of reciting the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha.
No, what is it? What I think they can get this level of Puja. Don't I need this and I'll call somebody, but Chulo Stroke Johnson, and don't I need this 2 weeks.
So again, they're saying for 2 weeks.
Don't I need the Comason, because I'm not Chulo Stroke Chesso.
Again, has to go elsewhere for 2 weeks, so we won't have the Tandane. For the next 2 weeks, there won't be any teaching because Genna has to go somewhere.
Yeah, good secret.
Secret mission.
Don't ask about those articles. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. That rang doing the Lama to be on was said that, but Lama to be on was said that what the channel.
So we again bring our attention to bear on the visualization of Shakyamuni Buddha.
What the channel. And it didn't because of the what the rang doing the Lataka don't Nanga Lama to be on was said out. What the channel. That was the Chan Kaja, Simja Tamjega Dondo, and the Sanja Komama, Tamado, Tabachigi, Samsaji, and Samluchke, Lochike.
Generate then the bodhicitta motivation of really, saying, I have to, there's no choice but for me to attain the state of enlightenment in order to properly benefit all sentient beings.
What is and what the legend because what the compassion and then the Simja Tamja do Sanja Koma Tobachigi, seven, what is Samlotane, and it Ranga Tago the Masimja Tamja, what the nation Samtango or Samsacha, then just Simja Tamja Sanja Koma Tobachigi, Saloke, and it did because Rangi Ninga Kato Davaging when Yaka to so Samsacha.
And that we bring that to mind again, I must attain that state of enlightenment to benefit all sentient beings. And indeed, all those sentient beings are in the space all around us without an exception.
What the Samutangu, what that took because of what the similar Sanja Goban, you want talking is Tobachigi, so the Loti, and the waking when Yaka was to so the Simja Tamjig took.
And then And then from the heart center of Shakyamuni Buddha.
No. Our thing.
At our heart center.
Sanje Koma Maton Toba Chigi, Sons of Kombashe, and Rajas, what the nigger Kanga Samatangu was some such, and Rajas Sanja Tamjaki, and Tugala, Davijin Wanyaka, Jusu, some such.
And so, and then through this thinking of how we must attain the state of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, but for both myself and all the sentient beings, at our own heart centers arises this moon disk mandala.
That's some Tamjaki, the Sanja Koma to win, singing Nate Kawato, Zejone, and Nate Kawata, the Manibatika Semsha. We then to attend some into Sons of Kombashe.
And that then we all are kind of referring to this self wanting to attain this state of enlightenment and reflecting on the lack of objective existence of such self, reaching that point of the mere negation of the object of negation and just pausing at that vacuity at that point.
What that the neg Kacha Kasam Komba Shechana, you know, do some Sons of Komba Shechana. Combustion or the nigger because of the gave a lot, and logic of a thing about you saw some that logic of a thing about you saw some such.
And through that very thinking of that point of the mere negation of the object of a negation, that mind gives rise to a 5-pronged Vajra, which is standing upright on the moon disk.
And the Tagoto, don't be singer or money, title money, so associated commercial.
And all around that, on the moon disk, surrounding the Vajra, is the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha, Tayata Muni Muni Mahamuni Svaha.
Oh, that Lama doing a set of Lama Tuba Tugale, or the nigger, Tawa Doche, Sengabache, and Tagoto title monument Mamuni, so I didn't not you the commercial.
And then likewise, the figure of Shakyamuni that we're visualizing in front is similarly at the heart center is this white moon disk mandala on which stands the 5-pronged Vajra and surrounded by the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha.
Oh, that and a rank doing a set of Lama Tuba on what data, and it did Tugala Yubet, Doja Zanga, but Telamine, and what a Dumbetsanga diet or monument mamas at Tanashua.
And so with our focus on that that setup in the heart center of Shakyamuni Buddha, we begin the recitation of the name mantra.
What is that? Diet or monument, diet or monument, diet or monument, did you ever cover any that's Janju sent that don't need to be shared a gay Yabota and Jangi Soso, Congress Soso, and it not to be Tanga. Duna said they were Tomaga, you tell my top part of some rares or what in the Combashieta, and it did a diet or monument, diet or monument, did it under any don't be a cushion to the West part of Mebatane. And how don't the Tembe Tuga Yube, Tawato Janga, but the West part of Mebata, Randa part of Mebatune, and around the subject, Randa Rangata, subject Tamjaka Tuga, Tawato Janga, but to come there, Tilapa, but to Casola, then Tembe Tuga, Tawato Janga, but and title monument moments, not till West part of Mebat, and till not a part of Mebat, Tawato Janga, part of Mebatune, Rasha subject Tamjake, Tuga, Tawato Janga, Comatilla, and my Casola. Casola, Tapkanja, my Tim Joss, some what in the compassion. What is the compassion? What is the Ranjuga, Janjuga, some that don't need to be shared out. And it what they get my give a care corner, give a corner to press some water compassion.
And so that we begin by really generating both the mind of enlightenment as much as possible, the pure wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, but also to bring in to that motivation the wisdom of really knowing that there is absolutely no phenomena that is any arising objectively, but it's merely imputed by thought. And to kind of really sustain that as much as we can. And as we recite the mantra, it actually sets off the incredible nectar light descending from the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha from his entire body, but particularly very intensively coming from the moon-dipped mandala and the five-pronged Vajra at his heart center. And it's kind of like describing, now, as the light comes down, it's kind of like filled with that mantra as well. And it dissolves into us and into all sentient beings and dissolves into the moon disk mandala and Vajra that we have at our own heart, and the mantra that is there as well. And so that we kind of feel that whatever bodhicitta and wisdom that has not arisen is now freshly arising, and what has arisen is increasing more and more and more as we recite the mantra.
Pato meba chune rangi kaso de rang simjeta tugal dao doje tsenga bata tembe tsenga komte ba daga ba timsu samsa pato meba chune timsu samsa wadene.
So it's like this limitless supply, like a snow falling. That we have this experience of imbuing and imbibing really was all of this blessing from the Buddha in front.
Leg down, rebirth, and the snow, my baby, my snow did a suit to a Maracatula, my team logo.
And so, yes, and so again, it's describing the snow as it hits a body of water, like a lake or a river, that it dissolves. It's kind of like doesn't sit on top of the water, it dissolves into that lake. In the same way for us.
Dayanda omoni moni ma moni yeso and dayanda omoni moni ma moni yeso dayanda omoni moni ma moni yeso and dayanda omoni moni ma moni yeso dayanda omoni moni ma moni yeso and dayanda omoni moni ma moni yeso dayanda omoni moni ma moni yeso and dayanda moni ma moni yeso dayada o 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 ma moni yeso dayada o moni 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 ma moni yeso Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai Tayata Muni Muni Mamuni Sohai我到南京那些恐怕些，这个说的，那么这边我对我到我就严重去，看不出主要这种可怕叫我呢，这个东南亚对吧？因此，对了，我就严重见的，严重就恐怕些，对这个落在上个就我表嘛大家起来就说上上去。其他个去跟着现在有点的主吧，就上要嘛的，上上去，有点的主吧，有那电锅就这个，电锅的有点的嘛，这个大这个要的是，有点主吧，就上要嘛的是，嘎着嘎上得了肾泡下降，我打的这个也没落地，不，你来的，你没经过人家看完就说上次去，边边头让给经过，甚至他们这个都三节恐怕你问你都马上他们都他们这个上上落去给，等着对吧？这个对吧？的，让给就我。 다음에 지금 약한 쇼소 서체는 반대자가 라마르무스 다게 지워배면서 그리고 고소도 좀 모두 짜도서 들었어도 자 스타비가스 페 니베가도 쇼 수베가도 때르주나 산제 고마마도 받아 제소 다 약보시 충소 선서 고마시야 아니 되게 랑게 지워 그 라마투베 다 좀바텔라 때네 다 쇼바텔라 때네 와다 산제 고마마도 제소 다 약보시 가고네 아니 되게 그래서 야라 좀 메데데 좀 앞이 어떻게 잡잖아.
Then, as we normally do, we begin the process of dissolution by, first of all, establishing a seat on our crown. And so here we are reflecting on renunciation, the fact that all of cyclic existence is in the nature of suffering. We cannot get beyond suffering within cyclic existence. And so we, from that definite sense of emerging from that state of suffering, brings forth the lotus mandala seat on our crown. And then reflecting on the fact that all internal and external phenomena lack any objective existence and are merely imputed by thought. And the fact that they lack any objective or independent existence means that they must arise in the independence themselves. And so from this assertion, this mind producing the sun mandala disc, which sits on top of the lotus. And then this aspiration of wanting to attain the state of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, that mind of enlightenment itself producing the moon disk mandala seat. Then we are ready for the invocation verse, inviting the Guru Buddha to our seat. O glorious and precious root Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the end of the first recitation, the figure moves from the space in front. At the end of the second, they arrive at our seat. At the end of the third, we have this certainty that they will remain until we attain the state of enlightenment. And this brings forth a tremendous sense of confidence and assurance and joy in our mind. And we are, spontaneously inspired to offer the 7 limbs of practice and the mandala offering.
Tena oya jo de kaso de ta kaja che ngen jong komba she or so ta kaja che kamzu twari to koba ke wane ta che ta kaja che or je ta kaja che kube tu jo ba ji ba yin sa ane je ta kaja che nge ba chue ngen jong komba she tena ma ta ta mo so komba she nge ba chue ngen jong ke ane ngen jong ke ne den de ge nge ba chue lo de ane ra nge de ba ma ta che che jo so sam sa cha ta de ne chi kaso de 지나가 저 컨디션 유전 좀 두상 요만 사서 공부시는 오다 된데게 가자 가점 저 링이 마샤잖아 안 된데 예배 로티 아니 님의 저거 약하고 좀 소성사체 그것도 배매다도 되네 심지어 담제도 산제 공부 요원이도 마다 터마도 도바치기 사서 공부시 안데 된데고 tumate dawe jibo dago 조소 반대서 라마를 다게 닌가 빼면서 그래서 고선 투종으로 써도서 되는 순대전 순대 담배 가서 지번에 뭐 라마도 배운 거죠 니베 가서 쇼 소매가 되는 쇼 산제 고마도 어째 소소 가고 되네 빼마다 이제 막 가서 남변닝 내다는 제가 도저가 생각 없이 가지 근데 다고도 좀 배청아 다이도 뭐는 다이도 뭐는 근데 이거 다 맞아 숨고 거대 왔을 때네 지수 잠에 거 순간 오마르바자 나디디도 오마르바자 나디디도 basum ko tene tende nga o ye ta ma hedo ma shamana so tende nga sarsum ko de godin ji ko ba she.
So then once again we contemplate on renunciation, and that's really this kind of determination to gain a definite emergence from this state of suffering. Really gives rise to the lotus mandala state again, and this time establishing it at our heart center. And on top of that, then reflecting on the fact that they're all internal and external phenomena, like any objective existence, and really arriving at that point of the mere negation of the object of negation, from that sort of void that arises the sun disk mandala, representing emptiness on top of the lotus. And then this determination again, this aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all, the bodhicitta intention, symbolized by the moon disk mandala. Once again, the invocation verse, "O glorious and precious Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind." And from this, then the first recitation causes the figure of the Buddha on our crown to move down through the crown chakra into the central channel. At the end of the second, they have arrived at our pre-prepared seat. And at the end of the third, they have established themselves there until we attain the state of enlightenment. And again, this feeling of confidence and joy arises in us. Now the petals of the lotus fold over and are sealed at the tip by a 5-pronged white vajra, and that the package then is surrounded by 3 mantras. The first, the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha in a clockwise direction. The second is the mantra of Manjushri in an anti-clockwise direction. And the third is the mantra of dependent origination in a clockwise direction.
What that the ranking use lama to be never tea. When Takacha the Kusum to the Vesapado, never to the Rangi one, Kandik Palo Veseton. Chivana Kandik Palo Vesetu. Veseton and Tomama divided the Kabatu Takaja Chukasodeta. Ukasorata, Lugo, Socha, Macha, Misanto, Juntamatsu, Macha, nothing to Lotala Subataka. That said, the Latsangama thing of Tom, the water, Nani, Martuanchus, Commercial, Nani, Dunchin, and Jebaka rushing about the Madobe, then never continue saw you when but Nani Dunchus. The Anish also to be tomato, the changes of a lava, the Sang, Padamala, draw some of the Kunjos or the Tabich, Papa Jundela, who was similar to a legible to a so died with the change of the change of the Jesuit, not told the Tabak coordinates on during the swatch condition when 장치 다와 중수 선사체 다가니체 루긴나자 셔트베 게겐 루긴나자 생각동에 조시 코마니와 살롱 틸레 견탐자 와 장치 다와 중수 선사체 다가니시 우리 다간제 파도도 다 뉴도 산제 고마도 토발라 견치시 타메나지 견탐자잖아 간나산제 다바람 잡아지 차도 야구시 중수 선서 고마시.
So from settling this, then the light rays begin to emanate from the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha within the lotus leaves, and these are, really powerful, countless source of light permeating through every cell of our bodies, from the crown of the head through the soles of the feet. And here it's this predominantly white light, which is purifying all negativities and obscurations that we have accumulated since beginningless time, and particularly centering on the 10 non-virtues of the killing and stealing and sexual misconduct, of physical actions, of the lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle gossip of verbal actions, and especially the malicious intent, covetousness, and wrong view of mental negativities. And that it deals with these negativities of this life that we recall, but also the previous life to that, going back to all lives through beginningless time. That it purifies all naturally occurring negativities and those actions proscribed by the Buddha. It deals with the kind of lack of respect that we have shown on occasion to our parents, and right up to our gurus, to the Sangha, to Arya beings, and so on. That the negativities that we have done ourselves, that we have incited others to do, that we have rejoiced in the doing of. All negativities associated with illness and sickness, and the disease of the body, of suffering and illness of the mind, all negativities causing imbalance in the elements of our body, and the channels, the winds and the drops, and particularly the fault of ordinary appearance, which is really something which is a great impediment to our quickly being able to attain enlightenment. This is eradicated and is substituted with pure vision.
Rangi Shindu Travel Lundi Nilenga Lama Shaja Sanga Good Legislative Society the Lama Shaja Sanga Kulu Jusu Subsacha Society Travel Sim the Nilencha Lama Shaja Sanga to the Legislative Society Sim the Lama Shaja Sanga Tula Jusu Rangi Lunga is so the Lama Shaja Sanga Kusu Dongo Yemna to Jusu some such what the Komasha and Rangas Nesa Nedia and Neg Gen Tamja Ten, Neg Gen Tamja Ten, Lava Shaja Sanga Davi Shindu Jusu some such. Utaka Lava Shaja Kusun to the Rangi Lungas Rochi to Jusu some what the Komasha. They were Toman, Jadun Yusumi Shikasu, some walk the Komasha.
And then through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the substantial cause, together with the body of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of a Buddha. And through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, together with the mind of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of a Buddha. And now I can see my own body, speech, and mind as inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of an enlightened being. I can rejoice in that. The place that I'm in also is transformed of all fault, purified of all fault, and becomes the palatial abode of an enlightened being. And this produces a bliss within the mind. This combines with voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
Lama Shaja so Kusun to Yeme Jua, Rochi the Jua, T, Nala Rashim was Komasha. Tukale Lama Shaja to Pato, about the Simjang Talent of Patune, and the Data Simjara, Sosola Timala Tena, Simja the Datamja, Kijig Lama Shaja and Kusun to Yemeku, some such. The Danasa net data new Gunta Lama Shaja singing Davish in the Jusu, some such. What are Simja Tamja Sanja Komala Kubi, so what are Nima didn't go to so that Kava Sansu, some what in the Komashe.
And then seeing myself as inseparable from an enlightened being, also regarding myself as lacking any inherent existence, I send out light rays equal in number to all the sentient beings in all the 6 realms of existence. That in the moment of dissolving into all the sentient beings, they arise as fully enlightened Buddhas. The place that they're in is purified of all fault and becomes the pure realm of an enlightened being. And here I can really rejoice and say how wonderful today is the day in which I have fulfilled that ultimate goal of leading all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment. This again produces that sense of bliss, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
Simjatanja Sanjay Sala Kova, Dish the Susi Jawaka Juba, to bring Soso the Javakanga, you then the Madro Toga Pada, some tea, the water, the Tonius Ishikasu, so Kumacha.
And that this process of leading all sentient beings to the state of enlightenment, the virtue that facilitates that, and myself as the agent of that virtue, I understand to lack any objective existence whatsoever, even at the atomical level. And that from this understanding produces a sense of bliss which combines with voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
다 된데 제부 된데 지금 삼로 코하는 시제 아니 문에 거라 된데 요래게 아니 주어 쇼스 아니 개념제 튕제 상와 용어 쇼스 다 된데 용어 소소 산제 고마도 타요마 소소 산제 고마도 와라 란지라 돈이니지 님부지게 람줄에 제고 다 된데 임바이자 근데 단단한 고조는 소소다 기부 중에다 두부 중에다 경고 나사 중에 경고처럼 타마 시조와 이내 대다 탐체 아니 된데 돈이니지 님부지게 람줄에 계획에 가서다 튕겨를 좋아쇼스 튕겨를 좋아쇼스 안 튕겨를 좋아 게 지금 대다 제노바쇼 제노바 다게 지금 대다 제노바 라마 투병부 징길랍도스 what is it
And that, of course, this is acting at the level of aspiration and imagination. To be able to take such massive strides is not so easy. But what we can do is to really make a very, very powerful and sincere dedication. And that, what we are thinking now, may we actually achieve the result of that as quickly as possible, and that may we have all the conducive conditions to be able to bring this off as quickly as possible. That whatever situation I am in, whether I am experiencing happiness or sadness, whether I am sick or healthy, even when I become old and decrepit, or even at the point of death, may I see all arising conditions as conducive conditions for my practice. And please, may this be the case. I pray that it is the case. I will see that it is the case. So Guru Deity, please bless me to make this the case.
Lai ma san ye do do wa che ya ma ba de ye sa lai ba ra sho chan bo se do bo che ma ye ma na ma ye yeah, go now, go do power show, go near the ma ya ba na ma ya yoro ya ya ba nya ba me ba ya ba nya gon do pe wa na sho ka ri ra we ko we shi ga ma pen da ya wa ma lu du ye ne che le se wa ten zin ja zo xia bian si de ba do dian jiu ro jie miao miao zi miao jie 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 zi jie miao jie wo mo jia miao ngai jie jie miao fu jie zong dai ba lo san dai be xiang lai so wan de me me zhe we jie jie liu se jie me ye be o bo jia be ya ngai jie jie be tu jie zong gai ba lo san dai be xiang lai so wan
You are Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of compassion, not aimed at true existence, and Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception. Sankapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows, Loshan Drakpa, at your feet, I make requests.